The silence in the house on Astor Street was a living thing. It nested in the dusty corners, crept up the oak stairs that groaned under the weight of ghosts, and settled on Ilara Vance's shoulders like a heavy, familiar cloak. At 28, Ilara was less an inhabitant and more a guardian of that historic Chicago brownstone, a reliquary of bricks and memories dedicated to one man, her father. The scent of old paper, leather, and the lemon polish she used on the furniture was the perfume of her childhood. But now it smelled of farewell. Every object told a story. The mahogany desk with its ink stains and scratches, where her father had spent sleepless nights sketching impossible schematics. The floor-to-ceiling shelves, filled not with books, but with hardcover journals, each one meticulously filled with his elegant handwriting, detailing inventions that never saw the light of day. To the world, Arthur Vance had been a failure, a dreamer whose ambitions led him to ruin. To Ilara, he was a giant, and that house was the last monument to his existence, a monument about to be demolished by the cold logic of numbers on a bank spreadsheet. The final letter had arrived that morning. The thick, impersonal paper trembled in her hands. Final foreclosure notice. The words seemed to scream in the quiet of the entryway. 30 days. She had 30 days to come up with a sum that was to her astronomical. Her salary as an archivist barely covered basic bills, let alone an inherited debt that had snowballed like an avalanche over the years. A shiver ran down her spine. The kind of cold that doesn't come from Chicago's harsh winter, but from despair. Her fingers traced the outline of a photograph on the wall. Her father, younger, smiling, his eyes shining with the promise of a future that never arrived. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered to the silence. "I failed you." It was then that the doorbell rang. The sound, sharp and insistent, was a profanity. No one visited. Her few friends knew of her seclusion, of her silent struggle. With her heart hammering against her ribs, she opened the door just a crack. Standing on her porch was a man who did not belong in her world. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal gray suit so perfectly tailored it seemed molded to his body. His dark hair was impeccably styled, and his eyes, a blue as deep and frigid as Lake Michigan in winter, assessed her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. There was no warmth in his gaze, only analysis. Ilara recognized him instantly, as all of Chicago would. Julian Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Industries, a tech titan known for his ruthless genius and for never ever smiling in photographs. "Miss Vance?" His voice was deep and precise, each syllable cut with the accuracy of a scalpel. "Yes?" Her own voice came out weak, a whisper. "My name is Julian Thorne. May I come in?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement of intent. Before she could refuse, he took a step forward, forcing her to retreat into the house. He entered, and with him, the atmosphere shifted. The air suddenly felt thinner, charged with the expensive scent of his cologne and the unmistakable aura of power. His blue eyes swept across the home's interior, not with admiration, but with the cold calculation of an appraiser. He stopped before her father's desk, the epicenter of Ilara's universe. "I know about your situation," he said, turning to face her. "The debt. The 30-day deadline. The exact amount is $573,812.41. The humiliation hit her like a punch. He had dissected her life, her failures, and now presented them to her as irrefutable facts. "What do you want?" she asked, crossing her arms, a fragile barrier against his overwhelming presence. "I have a proposal," he said, walking toward her. "A business arrangement. I will settle all your debts. The house will be yours, free of any encumbrance. In return, you will marry me." Ilara stared at him, certain she had misheard. An incredulous, bitter laugh escaped her lips. Is this some kind of sick joke? Julian's face remained a mask of neutrality. I don't make jokes, Miss Vance. The arrangement is simple. A one-year contract. We will maintain public appearances. At the end of the period, you will be free, with your financial situation permanently resolved. Why? She managed to ask, her mind spinning. Why me? You could have any woman in the world. The other women have their own ambitions. I require someone with nothing to lose and everything to gain. Someone who understands the value of a legacy, he said, his gaze shifting for a moment to her father's journals. And there is one other condition. He approached the desk and pointed to a worn wooden box hidden beneath it. The box that held her father's most personal prototypes and his final journals. You will move into my penthouse, and this box will come with you. I must have unrestricted access to it. That shocked her more than the marriage proposal. That box was sacred. Those are just mementos, sentimental junk. They have no value. To you, perhaps, he said, his eyes locking onto hers again. I am funding a philanthropic project to honor forgotten innovators. Your father's work interests me. It was a logical, corporate, and completely hollow explanation. Ilara felt, with a visceral certainty, that he was lying. There was something in that box, something that this powerful, cold man desperately wanted. He held out a black leather portfolio. The contract. Your lawyer can review it if you wish, but the offer is valid for 24 hours. 24 hours to choose between ruin and servitude, between losing the last piece of her father and selling herself to an enigmatic and possibly dangerous stranger. She looked at Julian Thorne's impassive face, at the portfolio in his hand, and finally at her father's photograph on the wall. His smile now seemed like a plea. With trembling fingers, Ilara took the portfolio. The leather was cool to the touch. She wasn't just signing a marriage contract, she was entering a game whose rules she didn't know, for a prize she didn't comprehend. She was giving herself to a man of ice to save the memory of a dreamer. The move to Julian Thorne's penthouse was like being transplanted to an alien planet. The brownstone on Astor Street was a living organism, breathing with the dust of decades and the creaks of old wood. The penthouse, hovering over Chicago like a raptor's nest, was the opposite. It was a vacuum, a vast expanse of glass, chrome steel and white marble, so polished Ilara could see her distorted reflection on every surface. There were no photographs, no books out of place, not the slightest sign that a human being with emotions lived there. It was less a home and more a minimalist art gallery, and the piece on display was Julian's own power. For the first few days, he was a phantom in his own house. He left before she woke up and returned long after she had retreated to the guest room, a room that was larger than the entire first floor of her old house. He communicated through his assistant, who sent her itineraries by email and via a limitless credit card left on the kitchen island with a single-word note: use. Ilara felt like a ghost wandering through a mausoleum. The loneliness was a chill that not even the state-of-the-art heating system could ward off. The only piece of her old world, the wooden box with her father's work, was locked in Julian's office. A piece of her soul, held captive. One sleepless night, driven by a restlessness that gnawed at her from the inside, she walked barefoot down the silent hallway. A sliver of light escaped from under the office door. Cautiously, she peeked through the crack. The scene made her hold her breath. Julian was there, his suit jacket thrown over a chair, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up to his elbows. He wasn't on his multi-screen computer or in a global conference call. He was hunched over the desk, and spread out before him were her father's journals and schematics. There was an intensity in his posture, a concentration so absolute that the rest of the world seemed to have disappeared. He traced the lines of a prototype with his fingertip, the expression on his face not that of a curious philanthropist, but of a code breaker on the verge of a discovery. In that moment, he didn't look like a cold businessman. He looked like a hunter. What was he searching for so intently? The trial by fire came a week later in the form of an invitation to the Illinois Institute of Technology's annual charity gala. "You are expected to accompany me," his assistant's email stated. A sapphire blue couture gown arrived in a box that afternoon, along with shoes and jewelry, pieces of a costume she would have to wear. As she entered the dazzling, overcrowded ballroom, Julian's arm firm at her waist, Ilara felt hundreds of eyes fall upon her. They were gazes that dissected, evaluated, and for the most part dismissed her. The whispers followed her like bees. "That's her. The archivist. They say she trapped him." Every word was a small needle prick on her skin. Julian, on the other hand, moved through the room with the indifference of a shark in familiar waters, greeting people with curt nods, his ice blue eyes never lingering on anyone for too long. He was a fortress, and she, the fragile ivy forced to cling to his walls. It was when Julian was intercepted by a business rival that she found herself alone for a moment. A moment was all he needed. "You look like a fish out of water." The voice beside her was warm, amused, and dangerously charming. She turned to find a man with the same dark hair and bone structure as Julian. But where Julian's eyes were Arctic cold, this man's danced with a mischievous light. He was smiling, and his smile transformed his face, making it approachable and magnetic. "I'm sorry," Ilara said. "Ilara Vance, I presume. I'm Marcus Thorne," he extended his hand. "The less intimidating cousin." She shook his hand, surprised by the genuine warmth of his touch. "It's a pleasure. The pleasure is all mine. I must say, you've caused quite a stir. My cousin has never shown interest in anything that couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet. And then, suddenly, he gets married." Marcus leaned in a little, lowering his voice. "I hope you know what you're getting into." Ilara stiffened. "I don't think our marriage is any of your business." "Perhaps not," he conceded, the smile never faltering. "But I know Julian. And I know that Thorne Industries was built on the wreckage of other companies, of other lives. His father was a master at it." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Did he mention that his father and yours knew each other?" Ilara's heart skipped a beat. "No, not that I'm aware of." "How odd," Marcus said with feigned innocence. "I've heard stories. Stories that your father was the real genius, and my uncle was the man who stole his ideas and left him to rot. Julian would do anything to keep that story buried." He glanced over to where Julian stood across the ballroom. "He's not interested in you, Ilara. He's interested in what your father left behind. Proof, perhaps. Something he needs to destroy. Be careful. Sam, if this story has touched you so far, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications." Marcus gave her arm a gentle pat and moved away, melting into the crowd as smoothly as he had appeared, leaving Ilara alone in the middle of the noisy ballroom, her heart pounding uncontrollably. The air seemed to thin. His words echoed in her mind, aligning with her own suspicions and fears. A betrayed genius, proof to be destroyed. Julian's obsession with the box. It all began to make a terrible kind of sense. The rest of the night was a blur. She played her part, smiled, nodded, but inside a hurricane was forming. When they finally returned to the silence of the penthouse, Ilara didn't go to the guest room. She marched straight to Julian's office. The door was unlocked, the wooden box was on the desk. Marcus's words, "He wants to destroy the proof," burned in her mind. With trembling hands, she lifted the heavy lid. It smelled of dust and memories. Ignoring the metal prototypes, she searched for the journals. She picked up the last one, the thickest, bound in faded black leather. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she knew with a terrifying certainty that she could no longer trust the man she had married. She needed to find the truth for herself. Ilara's nights transformed into a secret mission. After the penthouse's silence was broken by the soft click of Julian's bedroom door closing, she would creep into the office. Under the solitary light of a desk lamp, she delved into her father's journals, traveling back in time through his handwriting, which went from hopeful and vibrant to anxious and shaky. The first pages were a balm. In them, Alistair Thorne, Julian's father, was not a villain but a partner, a friend. May 12th, one entry read, Alistair and I celebrated today. Thorne Vance Dynamics is no longer a dream on paper. He has the business acumen. I have the engineering. Together, we will build the future. Ilara felt a painful pride. Her father wasn't a failed dreamer. He was half of a foundation. But as the months in the journals passed, the partnership began to fray. September 14th, Alistair registered the key patents under the Thorne name only. He said it was a bureaucratic formality to expedite investments. I don't like it, but he assured me my name would be on the partnership agreement. The knot in Ilara's throat tightened. She flipped through dozens of pages, her anxiety growing with her father's. February 3rd, I was excluded from a meeting with investors today. Alistair said my academic profile might scare them off. He's pushing me away. He's erasing me. The last journal entry was nearly illegible. The words smudged by what Ilara feared were tears. He betrayed me. Everything. Thorne Industries is as much mine as it is his. But he pushed me out with a pitiful severance and a non-disclosure agreement that gags me. He stole my work, my name, my life. But he doesn't have everything. He doesn't have the heart. The Chimera's heart is safe. Chimera. The name leaped off the page. It was a code name for the project her father and Alistair had worked on together, the true foundation of Thorne Industries' technology. The Chimera's heart. Proof. The proof Marcus had mentioned and that Julian was hunting. Armed with this crumb of truth, Ilara decided to confront him indirectly. She found him the next morning in the kitchen, reading market news on a tablet, his coffee untouched beside him. "Good morning," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He just nodded. "I was organizing some of my father's notes yesterday," she lied, her heart hammering, "and I kept seeing a word, Chimera. Does that sound familiar to you? Maybe an old company project?" Julian's reaction was instant and violent, though almost imperceptible. His shoulders tensed. The fingers holding the tablet turned white. His ice-blue eyes lifted to meet hers, and for the first time, she saw a glint of warning in them. "Your father's work has no relevance to the company's current operations," he said, his voice clipped. "I suggest you focus on the terms of our agreement and leave the past where it belongs." "I was just curious," she backpedaled, trying to sound casual. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Ilara," he said, standing up. "There are things best left unearthed." And with that, he left, leaving the threat hanging in the air between them. His reaction was all the proof she needed. He knew everything, and he wanted her away from the truth. Now, suspicion burned inside her like a fever. The Chimera's heart wasn't in the box. The journals were the key, but not the treasure. It had to be somewhere else, and there was only one place her father would have considered truly safe, the brownstone on Astor Street. The next day, making a flimsy excuse about needing to pick up personal items, she took a taxi to her old home. The cold Chicago air whipped her face as she stepped onto the familiar sidewalk, but the feeling of home was gone, replaced by a dark premonition. The front door was slightly ajar. Ilara's heart stopped. She never left the door unlocked. Her pulse racing, she pushed the door open. The entryway was as she had left it. The living room too. It was when she reached the door to her father's old workshop in the basement that the smell of mildew and metal was tainted by something else. Disarray. The place had been ransacked, but not by a common thief. The small TV was untouched. The old stereo too. The target was specific. The floorboards had been pried up. The plaster walls were broken in places. Her father's toolboxes were overturned, their contents spilled across the floor like the entrails of a slaughtered animal. Someone had been there. Someone who wasn't looking for money, but for an object small enough to be hidden. Someone looking for the same thing she was. She backed out of the room, terror rising in her throat. This was no longer about a contract or an old injustice. Marcus's words about danger and Julian's veiled warning collided in her mind. This was real. And the fact that the intruder hadn't found what they were looking for wasn't a relief. It was a promise that they would be back. The brownstone was no longer a sanctuary. It was a crime scene, and she realized with a bone-chilling clarity that by starting to unravel her father's secret, she had transformed from a pawn in Julian's game into a target for his enemies. She was alone, and she was being hunted. Ilara returned to the penthouse like a frightened animal seeking refuge. The security that once suffocated her, the doormen, the cameras, the elevators that required key codes, now seemed like the only thing keeping her breathing. She locked the door behind her, the sound of the deadbolt echoing her own self-imposed prison. The image of her childhood haven, violated and torn apart, was seared onto her eyelids. She didn't tell anyone. Who would she call? The police, to explain that she thought her billionaire husband's billionaire cousin had broken into her house to find a secret invention she had no proof of. She would sound insane. Paranoia was a fever consuming her from the inside out. When Julian arrived that night, he found her on the living room sofa, huddled under a blanket, even though the apartment was warm. She was staring at the city lights, but not seeing them. He stopped several feet away, his presence filling the silence. She could feel him watching her, his analytical gaze trying to decipher her stillness. "Are you all right?" he asked. The question, in his controlled voice, sounded almost clinical. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice cracking. He didn't move. "You're pale, and you're trembling." He took a step toward her, and she flinched instinctively, sinking further into the sofa. It flashed for a split second in his eyes before being replaced by a mask of frustration. He stopped, acknowledging the chasm between them. "If you're in trouble, Ilara, you need to tell me." "And why would I do that?" she retorted, the bitterness sharp in her voice. "So you can tell me that curiosity is dangerous?" He had no answer. He just watched her for another long moment, a silent battle waged in his eyes, before turning and heading to his office, leaving her heartbroken by his betrayal and terrified of the danger he refused to name. That night, the image of the destroyed workshop wouldn't let her sleep. The intruder hadn't found what they were looking for. That meant the chimera's heart was still there, hidden. Her father, she realized, was a man of patterns, meticulous yet sentimental. He wouldn't have hidden it in an obvious place. He would have hidden it in plain sight, in something he loved. And then, the memory hit her like a lightning bolt. Her father, sitting in his worn leather armchair, reading a book. It was always the same one. A tattered old edition of 20,000 Leagues Under the Seas by Jules Verne. "Everything important, Ilara," he had told her once, "is hidden in the depths." The next day, she returned to the brownstone. Fear was a metallic taste in her mouth, but determination was stronger. She went straight to the living room bookshelf, ignoring the mess around her. There it was, the book. With trembling fingers, she opened it. The pages were yellowed and worn, but in the middle of the book, a perfect rectangle had been cut out, creating a secret compartment. And inside it, nestled in faded velvet, was a polished metal cylinder, no bigger than her thumb, covered in copper filigree and with a small crystal lens at one end. The chimera's heart. It was real. She took it back to the penthouse, the weight of the object in her pocket feeling like it weighed a ton. She didn't know what to do with it, only that it was the weapon everyone was fighting for. That night, Julian found her in his office, the metal cylinder on the desk between them. The time for secrets was over. His face lost all color when he saw the object. Where did you find this? Where my father left it, she replied, her voice steady. Now you're going to tell me the truth, all of it, or I take this object, walk out that door, and hand it directly to Marcus Thorne. It was the first time she saw him look truly shaken. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if composing himself. When he opened them, the coldness had been replaced by a dark exhaustion. He would tell you anything to get his hands on it, and then he would kill you. Give me one reason to believe you. Julian rounded the desk and stood in front of her, closer than he had ever been. Because my father destroyed yours, he said, the confession coming out raw and unadorned. He stole the company, the technology, the legacy. It's my family's original sin, a poison I've been trying to clean up since I took over. He pointed to the cylinder. That isn't just a prototype. It's the original master key. It contains the foundational encryption codes for all our technology. In Marcus's hands, he could trigger a cascading failure in our system, bankrupt us in hours, and buy the wreckage for pennies. Ilara stared at him, the world tilting on its axis. Marcus doesn't want justice for your father, Julian continued, his voice low and urgent. He wants chaos. He hates the Thorne name more than anything, and he wants to be the one to burn it to the ground. He paused, and his eyes met hers. I learned of this thing's existence 6 months ago, and I learned Marcus was looking for it too. I had to find it first, and I had to get you out of his way. So you married me, she whispered, the understanding as painful as the betrayal. It was the only way I could think of to bring you under my roof, where I could protect you, he admitted, and for the first time she heard something like regret in his voice. It was a calculated, cold move. I used you. But the danger Marcus poses is real. The break-in at your house, that was just the beginning. Ilara looked at the metal cylinder and then at the man before her. He had manipulated her life, caged her, lied to her. But he was also confirming her father's genius and the injustice he had suffered. He had used her, yes, but perhaps in a twisted, arrogant way, he had also been saving her. The truth was a labyrinth, and she was lost in the center. Marcus thinks you haven't found the key yet, Julian said, his voice pulling her from her thoughts. That gives us an advantage, a single chance to turn the tables on him. But I can't do it alone. He looked directly at her, the vulnerability in his eyes the most shocking thing she had ever seen. I'm not asking you to trust your husband, Ilara. I'm asking you to trust an ally, because the war has already started, and you're holding the only weapon that can win it. Will you fight by my side? Ilara looked at the man before her, a puzzle of ice and fire, of manipulation and protection. Trust was still a foreign land, but the battlefield was her territory, her father's memory, her flag. She lifted her chin, the cool metal cylinder in her hand. I'll fight with you, she said, her voice resonating with a strength she didn't know she possessed. But on my terms. When this is over, I want the whole truth, unfiltered. And I want my father's name publicly restored. Then our contract is dissolved, and I will be free to go. A muscle twitched in Julian's jaw. He nodded, accepting the terms of her surrender, which sounded strangely like a victory. Done. Julian's plan was, like him, brilliant, audacious, and merciless. They wouldn't hide. They would attack in plain sight. Within 48 hours, Thorn Industries announced a gala event to launch the Vance Thorn Foundation for Forgotten Innovators. It was leaked to the business press that the highlight of the evening would be the unveiling of a lost prototype by Arthur Vance, a piece that formed the basis of Thorn's technology. It was a golden lure, and they knew that Marcus, consumed by greed and ego, wouldn't be able to resist taking the bait. The night of the gala was a storm of camera flashes and fake smiles. Ilara, in a black velvet gown that was both elegant and armor, felt Julian's hand on her back, a constant point of warmth in a sea of cold. They were the picture of unity and power, a carefully constructed lie to stage the truth. Behind the scenes, the tension was palpable. The Chimera's heart was secure in a vault, but an exact replica sat on the podium, waiting. As expected, Marcus didn't wait. 10 minutes before the announcement, an assistant informed them that Marcus Thorn demanded a private meeting in the venue's library. The trap was set. The library was dark, filled with shadows and the smell of leather. Marcus wasn't alone. 2 burly men guarded the door. His smile was that of a predator that has cornered its prey. What a touching performance, little cousin. The grieving widow and the husband who saved her. It's almost poetic. He turned to Ilara. Hand it over, Ilara. Now. And maybe I'll convince Julian to give you a piece of the profits when I sell the company off, piece by piece. It's over, Marcus, Julian said, his voice calm. Marcus laughed, an ugly sound. Oh, it's just beginning. You think I don't know what that little thing does? It will expose the fraud this company was built on. I will destroy the Thorn name, and you, Julian, will be the last pathetic king of a castle of ash. He took a step forward. Now give me the prototype, or my friends here will make sure the grieving widow becomes a real one. That's a shame, Julian said, looking at a spot just over Marcus's head. Because you just confessed your plans for extortion, coercion, and corporate destruction to the entire board of directors. The color drained from Marcus's face. He spun around, following Julian's gaze. Hidden on a bookshelf, the lens of a tiny high-definition camera gleamed, a live feed to a secure boardroom. Checkmate. Before Marcus could react, the door burst open and event security flooded in. It was finished. 20 minutes later, Julian took the stage. The crowd fell silent. But he didn't speak of the foundation. He spoke of a friendship between 2 young visionaries, Arthur Vance and Alistair Thorn. He spoke of a broken partnership, of a genius erased from the history books. With Ilara by his side, he told the truth, restoring her father's name not as a failure, but as the silent co-founder of an empire. It was a public confession, a historical correction, and for Ilara, the final absolution. Back in the penthouse, the Chicago sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The adrenaline had faded, leaving an exhausted but peaceful silence. The marriage contract lay on the coffee table, along with a pen. "Your father's name has been restored," Julian said, his voice soft. "His shares in the foundation have been transferred to your name. You are financially secure for the rest of your life. The brownstone is yours. You are free, Ilara, exactly as you asked." He was giving her the way out. The cage door was open. She looked at the contract, the proof of her servitude, and then at the man who had imprisoned her only to, in the end, free her in every way that mattered. She didn't need him anymore. And that was why the choice she was about to make was the only one that had ever been truly hers. She picked up the contract. Julian watched, his face unreadable. Slowly, methodically, she tore it in half, and then in half again, letting the pieces flutter onto the table. "My father taught me that the true value of an invention isn't in the patent, but in the partnership that created it, she said, raising her eyes to meet his. I think I've spent too much time living in the past. I'm interested in building something new. A smile, the first genuine smile she had ever seen, touched Julian Thorne's lips. He crossed the space between them and took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. So am I. The contract was broken, but as they watched the city awaken, a new bond, forged in secrets, danger, and a reluctant trust, was just beginning to form. It wasn't a legacy of thorns, but the promise of a garden they could finally grow together. If this emotional story of Alara and Julian touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like to help us reach more people. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I read them all. Explore our other videos and dive into another world of emotions. Thanks for watching and see you next time.